Welcome to another episode of the CPG Guys podcast. Our co-hosts, Shri Rajagopalan and Peter V.S. Bond, explore how brands and retailers engage with consumers online, in-store, and everywhere in between. And now, here are Shri and Peter. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the CPG Guys podcast, where we explore how brands and retailers understand and engage consumers in a digitally driven world. I'm PVSB. When I'm not co-hosting this fabulous podcast, I work as the Vice President of Partner Strategy and Development at Fetch Rewards, a mobile loyalty platform. And I'm joined in this hosting responsibility of the podcast by my dear friend who has just returned from what I would call a whirlwind 2-week travel adventure that took him to Florida and New York several times over, before returning to Los Angeles, where this past weekend he attended his daughter Rhea's live streaming performance on Amazon Music's Twitch TV. Please welcome my dear friend Shri. Shri, how are the travels? How you doing?
Doing awesome, Peter. You're right. I got to multiple times to Orlando for work, and then I saw you at the Nielsen conference, and then did a bucket list item, as you know, in New York. I went to the Yankees homecoming dinner and met the entire roster one-on-one for 5 minutes each. I have 22 new baseballs with autographs. And then, Peter, we extend that MLB thing. You're coming over this weekend, and we're actually going to do a Dodger Stadium tour. Not just watch the game and next to the dugout, but actually do a tour. So checking off those bucket list things, man. And then to top it all off, icing on the cake, Rhea graduates at Yankee Stadium from NYU. So could not have gotten any better.
Looking forward to the game this weekend, Shri. It's a preview to my follow-up trip next month when we get to go to the All-Star game at Dodger Stadium. So baseball happiness all around. Both our teams lead their leagues. For those of you who are not baseball fans, we're sorry that you have to endure this constant conversation. But hey, it's what we're all about, and we're not going to deny that. We have to be authentic, right? So thanks, Shri, for that. To our audience, I want to make sure that you are following us on LinkedIn. When we were at the Nielsen 360 conference, Shri, and we asked people to follow us in the audience, it was amazing. Like, we saw our numbers spike through the roof. It was really crazy. You know, we publish a great deal of content, not just the podcast episodes, but articles we like, thought leadership, and what have you. You'll all find it on our LinkedIn company page. Just use the LinkedIn app or linkedin.com to search for CPG Guys. And when you find our page, just click the blue follow button. And of course, as always, Shri, doesn't cost nothing. It's free. So why not do it? A few other items I want to mention before we kick off the conversation today. Make sure you're also following our sister podcast, the FMCG Guys, which takes our format over to Europe and speaks with fast-moving consumer goods luminaries across the pond. You can find them on all major podcast platforms by visiting fmcgguys.com. And lastly, the CPG Guys are tremendously honored to be partnered with Next Up, formerly known as Network of Executive Women, whose mission is to advance all women in business. Next Up is 19,000 members strong, and to learn more about the resources and networking opportunities they offer, just visit nextupisnow.org/CPG Guys. It's in the digital liner notes of this podcast episode, so you can find the link there. And Shri, we've got like our own microsite. That makes us kind of official. That's pretty interesting. All right, let's get to the topic at hand today. Our guest today is someone who was introduced to us through our FMCG Guys podcasting colleague, Daniel Torres-Dwyer. She hails from the Pacific Northwest and has an incredibly impressive brand management background, spending the better part of 2 decades at the Colgate-Palmolive company, starting as a summer intern during her MBA program at the Wharton School, and after a brief post-MBA stint at the Clorox company, returned to Colgate-Palmolive, eventually reaching her current role as the Vice President and General Manager for Oral Care in North America. Here to speak with us about brand management in a post-pandemic world is Dana Medema. Dana, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Good. Hi, guys. Hi, Peter. Hi, Shri. Thanks for having me. I will try my best to participate in the baseball banter. I'm not super knowledgeable, but I'm in New York, so I feel like I need to jump in on the Yankees discussions. So anyways, welcome. Thanks for having me.
No. New York Yankees fan. Boo, boo, hiss, hiss.
Peter, to be recorded, this is the first time in 200 plus episodes I've got a fellow Yankee. This is good.
Oh, geez. Yeah, you usually get Red Sox fans more than anything, Shri. That's the one that irritates you more than anything. Hey, Dana, before we get to the questions we've prepared, it would be great if you would give us a brief overview of your company and what your current responsibilities are.
Yeah, so look, hopefully people know Colgate-Palmolive Company. I mean, Colgate as a brand is, I think, in more homes globally than any other brand that I know of. So hopefully everyone's got at least a tube of toothpaste with the name Colgate on it somewhere. But I've been with Colgate, as you mentioned, for over 20 years. So I spent half my career, I guess, más o menos, in the U.S. and the other half in Europe. And I've done a little bit of everything. So I have done pure brand management, more what we'll call commercial excellence or execution, to innovation, to more strategy, to working in global roles, and kind of everything under the sun. So happy to talk about my experience. And prior to that, as you mentioned, I was at Clorox for a couple years, started out in their Brita division. So I've done everything from selling pitchers, water filtration pitchers, to toothpaste tubes and body wash, and a little bit of everything in between.
That's great, Dana. Thank you. And I can tell you that the Bond household is a Colgate household. I personally use Prevident 5000. Yes, it's a prescription toothpaste, but I love it. It's wonderful. And it amazes me when I think Craig, your colleague, Dubitsky, when he was at Nielsen Consumer 360, mentioned some pretty high household penetration levels for the Colgate brand. So really great to talk to you about all this business today. Of course, we're going to put in the digital liner notes of this podcast episode links to your LinkedIn profile and to obviously the Colgate brand site. So anyone who's listening, you don't have to write it all down. Just open up your mobile app, which you're probably listening to the podcast on, and click on the digital liner notes, and there'll be hyperlinks to everything. And you can browse while you're listening. That's why people love to multitask. So let's get to the questions that we've prepared. I'm going to start us off, and then Shri will follow. Dana, would you start by walking us through your career progression at Colgate-Palmolive, highlighting some of the pivotal roles that helped you prepare for your current general manager position in oral care?
Yeah, so let me actually even start before Colgate, which is, you could never have told me 20 plus years ago, are you going to have a career in brand management? For starters, I would have told you I don't even know what that is. What I knew is that I wanted to run a business. And so if someone who wants to run a business, you start to say, well, what are then the skills or the experiences that I need to have to do that? And so I got into brand management knowing that I could kind of run a business inside a bigger business. So started out in the typical fashion, managing a small-ish brand. I started out on Irish Spring, which is an iconic brand that's been around, I think, since the 70s, in a more traditional commercial role. Then was like, okay, this is kind of fun, but I also want to get my little fingers into innovation. So moved over into our innovation center, and innovation for us is everything from coming up with the idea to then transferring it over to the teams for commercialization. So got a little bit of innovation experience. And then I said to myself, well, this has all been kind of fun. I also would like to get some global experience because I wanted to understand what it feels like to work and manage brands outside the U.S. So went and moved over into our global toothbrush division based out of the U.S., but working on innovation and strategies globally. And then I got tapped on the shoulder and they were like, why don't you come over to Europe and actually get some experience working in the European division? And so popped over to Europe and was in what we call more strategy role. So you're kind of rallying a group of 26 countries, which made up Europe, but you're trying to take global strategies and then implement them at the local level. And so that was, really fun and exciting. And then did some work of combining two of our organizations, a company that we had picked up, and then bounced again into Germany and did a more commercial on the ground experience. And so what I would say is that my career, if I had to kind of summarize it, it's all been this mosaic of experiences that then prepared me for a general manager role, which is a little bit of everything. I've got an innovation team. I have a commercial excellence team, and then I have what we call impactful brand engagement. So they're doing what would be traditionally some of that marketing communications and content development. And because I've kind of spent time in all of those roles, I can empathize a bit with the people that are doing those roles. I have just enough knowledge to be what I'll call slightly dangerous.
Slightly dangerous indeed. That's what we love to hear, Dana. Welcome to the show, first of all, on the CPG Guys. We're thrilled to have you here. You're actually second person from Colgate-Palmolive to visit, and we love that. And hopefully there'll be many more in the future following in your footsteps. But you mentioned general manager experiences and roles, and we noticed that you actually have spent quite a good deal of time working in Europe, Germany, Switzerland. I mean, these are amazing experiences to get in addition to being here now in the mothership in the United States. But we'd love to get your perspective on how brand management in Europe happens. Is it different because they call it FMCG? We know because we have a sister podcast called the FMCG Guys. And tell us what the big aha moment in that difference is as you learned doing your job in Europe versus the United States. And is it different in the first place? Maybe we got it wrong. Maybe it's the same thing.
Yeah, so it's a great question. I think there are obviously differences in a sense that in the US, you have a lot of consolidation, right? You have some big customers, some down south, some up in the Pacific Northwest, versus if you go over to Europe, you've got 26 countries-ish, depending on how people count the countries that make up Europe. Each one has got their own set of customers. There's not really at a European level this one customer that covers most of the European countries. So you basically go from one country to the next, dealing with a different set of retail environments, dealing with a different level of potentially retail environments. That's one thing. So you need to have tremendous amount of flexibility in your thinking. The other piece is the digital landscape is very different. Once again, you have one set of quote unquote rules because the US has maybe more homogenous set of rules as it relates to digital and digital commerce versus you go over to Europe and each country has its own set of rules and its own set of regulations that you need to deal with. So I would say you learn, quite quickly that doing business in Europe, especially if you're looking to do a more digital first business in Europe, is not that easy. Each country is going to have its own set of opportunities as well as challenges. And so you really learn, like, where am I going to focus? What's going to be the most important? And how do I take at least in my case, how do you take some global strategies, but what's the right level of localization you need to do to win? So I would say that there's definitely, some similarities and that, yes, Colgate as a toothpaste brand shows up kind of around the globe the same way, but how you get it into a retail environment or into a digital landscape is going to be very different.
To your point on digital landscape, it was very evident to Shri and me that Colgate-Palmolive has a strong commitment to digital consumer engagement, as evidenced by the significant presence of your colleague, Brigitte King, the Chief Digital Officer, at this year's Consumer Analyst Group of New York, or CAGNY conference. I think we remarked in a Fresh 4 news segment at the beginning of one of our episodes, we hadn't seen anything like that from any of the other publicly traded packaged goods companies that were presenting at the conference. So it really caught our attention. So we'd love to know how you collaborate with this impressive digital team to deliver meaningful outcomes in the oral care business unit.
Yeah, and I think you hit on a key word there is collaborate. Like the biggest mistake I would say companies could make is if you start to silo. Like we create a little digital team over here and they're digital and you guys are brand. That's just not the way it's going to work anymore. That's not how consumers shop. Like you don't show up as a consumer and say, you know what, I'm going to be a digital consumer today. You show up as a consumer. And so this is an old term, but I think it's kind of making its way back. I think now we're framing it as omni. But back in the day, if you remember, we used to call multifunctional selling teams, right? And it was supposed to be a cross representation of a group of people that needed to bring a product to life. And I think that's what we're kind of going back to in many ways, which is you're going to have a pod of people that need to all work together if you want to see true success, because, we're consumers. Think of how you show up. You don't just shop or you don't buy in one way anymore. You might get served an ad on Instagram. You look at the ad and say, hey, I'm kind of interested. I click. And then you're like, okay, well, wait a minute. I don't really know about it. So let me now show up in the store and see if I really, really like it. And if you have teams that are siloed, there's not going to be this kind of, I would say, really synergies in that experience. The experiences are potentially going to be very disconnected, disjointed if you're not working as a kind of one business team. So I would say, we collaborate really closely. And I think you had my colleague Diana on before. Like, she and I are like lockstep. We're partners in crime, as I like to tell her, in making sure that we can, help in Colgate's digital transformation.
Well said, first of all, Dana, that it's, I use the word omni-channel. That word has made itself like a complete 360 and come back but yeah, omni-channel is the way to go. There's no debate. The consumer, like you said, doesn't think of e-commerce and on the shelf and off the shelf and stuff like that. No doubt, which leads me to actually my next question, which is one of the fastest growing spaces in omni-channel is retail media. And following up on the role of digital within oral care, what is your recommendation on how to make decisions on retail media, and where should the budgets come from?
Yeah, so first, I would say before it even is a question of how you make decisions on retail media, I think the question first needs to be, where are your priorities? Like, more than anything right now is the need to focus. There is like so much going on. There's so much data. There's so many places that you could invest. The first question a team needs to have, and I do this once again in lockstep with our sales organization, with Diana's commerce organization, which is, what are the priorities? Where are the brands and categories that we want to focus on? And what are the most important consumers and customers to bringing that strategy to life? Then you say, okay, let's understand the consumer journey. Like, how does a consumer make a decision? How do they show up? And then based on that, what's the best way to then spend money? Because I need to spend money in the places where I know they're going to show up. And so if the place they make the decision is all the way down to the, let's call it what they call lower funnel. If they're making decisions more lower funnel, then that's where we need to put the money. If they're making the more decisions across the full little of the funnel, then we're going to have to figure out a way to divvy up that money to make sure that we can push them from all the way to the top to the bottom. So I would say it's not that easy. I think the choice needs to be, once again, always going back to, what is my business objective? What is my brand objective? And what do I know about the consumer journey?
Before we continue with this week's episode, a brief message about Next Up. Next Up is a growing community of over 14,000 professionals representing nearly 900 organizations across North America, all devoted to advancing women in business. Make sure to register for the virtual event called The Great Resignation and Burnout that comes along with it, occurring on Tuesday, June 28th at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific, which explores the impact of the Great Resignation on companies, to our bodies, to our minds, and what can we do to address it. For more information on how to get involved with Next Up, visit nextupisnow.org/CPGguys. And don't forget to tune in to the Advancing All Women podcast on Voice America, hosted by Next Up President and CEO Sarah Alter. Listen every Friday at 7 a.m. Pacific Time on the Voice America Empowerment Channel, with rebroadcasts weekly on the Voice America Influencers Channel. And download episodes after they air wherever you get your podcasts. Remember, visit nextupisnow.org/CPGguys to learn more about becoming a member of Next Up. And now, back to our episode already in progress.
I want to remind our audience that today, Shri and I are speaking with Dana Medema from the Colgate-Palmolive Company. I couldn't agree with you more. You need to understand what your priorities are, what the outcomes you're looking for, and that will guide you to the proper investment strategy. I'll also say you mentioned about trying to understand the customer journey, and particularly as it relates to how they shop. You mentioned they don't decide I'm digitally shopping, I'm physically shopping. It reminds me of my first job out of business school was with Hart's Pet Care. And it fascinated me that the buying decisions at most retailers had pet food with a grocery buyer, and I was working at Hart's Pet Care. Pet supplies was with the general merchandise buyer. Nobody walks down the aisle thinking, I'm going to buy general merchandise for my pet today, or I'm going to buy food for my, they think, I've got a dog, and I need to make a decision about buying a dog. It's no different than how you're trying to holistically think about shopping. So you brought up our friend Diana Hosling, who was a guest. By the way, you'll love this, Dana. She's now our second most downloaded episode ever, and she's gunning for number one, which is currently owned by Seth Dallaire. who's at Walmart now, but I know she's very excited about that. She's getting close.
I'm going to bet Dana will beat it.
Oh,
I know. I'm thinking now
no.
she's going to, as she's racing, coming in the inside to close over the line and win the Kentucky Derby. It could well be. We'll have to see. But anyhow, Diana shared with us during her conversation the extensive direct-to-consumer operations at Colgate-Palmolive, particularly in oral care. We know that this can be a tremendous source of first-party or 1P data that can help fuel customer relationship management activities, customer journey mapping, building lifetime loyalty. Would love to understand how you think about 1P data to do all of those things. You get some of it from direct-to-consumer. Are there other sources you're focused on that help you better understand consumer behavior and, calculating customer lifetime value? And how does that kind of impact all of the operational decisions you're making?
Yeah. So look, there's two words that probably people talk about all the time. One is omni. Actually, maybe three words. First, it's digital transformation, and then they'll talk omni, and then they'll talk 1P data. So look, everyone's trying to figure out, how do I get more one-to-one kind of connections with people who buy my products? Some people call them consumers, some people call them customers. So I'll just say people, the people that buy your products. And so one of the things that we've started thinking about is, every time we show up, every time we have some type of connection point, how do you leverage that connection point as an opportunity to create this one-to-one dialogue? So for example, if I'm picking up a toothpaste product that's one of our, Recycle Me, can I have a QR code on there, connected packaging, that allows them to learn a bit more? And if they say, look, I actually really like what you guys are doing here, how can I ask them to maybe share some information with me, because I'd like them to be part of my sustainability mission? That's a real simple opportunity to just, once again, create the connection. It's not just about grabbing 1P data to grab 1P data. If that's what you're doing, then I think that you've missed the point. I think this is about, how do I create value and create a connection? That connection allows me to get that data. That data then allows me to start a journey of having a long-term, lifetime discussion with you, and ideally partnership over the various life stages that will occur in your lifetime. So I hope that answered your question, but I would say we're looking at 1P data at all touch points. You're looking to solve an issue with cavities. You're looking to buy something on Amazon. You're looking to pick up a package in Walmart. You saw one of our ads. Like, it's always around, how can I make those connections at every point where I'm showing up?
That's the word, Peter. Every point where the brand is showing up, right? Which leads me to an innovation question. Needless to say, innovation is what refreshes the brand in the eyes of the consumer, routinely and often. Peter and I, of course, were at Nielsen IQ 360, and we heard your colleague Craig Dubitsky, the Chief Innovation Strategist for CP, speak at the conference. So how is innovation fostered at CP? I got to tell you, Dana, that's one of the best speeches, public keynotes Peter and I have probably ever seen. We were left really inspired. So how is innovation fostered at CP? And then how do you partner specifically with Craig and those on the specific CP stakeholders with the innovation team? And then how does retail come into the mix on all of this?
Yeah, so we'll start with first, I'll answer the connection with Craig. I mean, part of the reason, we have someone like Craig in this organization is because you have to teach every single person that they have creativity. Everyone is creative. People say, oh, no, that's just for the innovators. That's the super creative person. All of us are creative. Okay, so that's the one, I would say, mindset shift that we have to have within the organization, because, yes, product innovation is one piece to this, but it could be, are you innovative in how we engage with consumers? Because remember, the product is one element. We want to create innovative brand experiences. That could be the product, that could be the packaging, that could be the communication. So there's plenty of opportunities around an innovation development for people to, I would say, lean in with their creativities. And someone like Craig, what he does is he brings that kind of mental shift that we all need to take, which is we all have it in us. You just need to unlock it, right? So that's great. How are we fostering it at Colgate is a few things. One, you have to make a commitment to being innovative. People will say like, oh, you guys just make toothpaste. How is that being innovative? Well, guess what? Cavities is still a problem. Gum disease is still a problem. So there's plenty of opportunities to be innovative and solve problems. Innovation is about not innovation for innovation's sake, but innovation for solving people's problems. Cavities is the number one problem disease among kids. That is incredible. In this day and age, it's still a problem. And so how do we help solve those people's problems? That's the way we're thinking of innovation at Colgate. And so we kind of follow the design thinking model, as well as this idea of how do you address the pain point, not just come up with innovation for innovation's sake. Then obviously for retailers are, obviously they're looking for how do you bring something that's most important for my shopper? If my shopper is more of a beauty enthusiast, how do you give me something that could really lean in with the beauty enthusiast? And that could be, we did a line of products, for example, with Ulta, where it was a line of more beauty first products, partnership with Ulta, so that you can kind of, if you look at beauty today, there's always this bit of, sexiness that comes up with beauty. There's this bit of mystery. So how do you bring some of that to a category that people will say is kind of boring, right? It's not boring, by the way, but people will say oral care is boring. So how do you kind of now bring some of that fun and beauty kind of cues, but with the efficacy that you would expect for something that at the end of the day needs to take care of your oral health?
Wow, that was awesome, Dana. Thank you for giving us a little peek under the hood of how innovation comes to life at Colgate-Palmolive. There's no denying that the last couple of years we've seen the words you used were transformation, certainly in the landscape of consumer goods. We have an audience of about 13,000 industry professionals who follow us on LinkedIn and listen to our podcast. So in talking to your contemporaries in the brand space, how do you recommend that they think about investing against their brands, be it in terms of the people, the skills, the capabilities? What kind of is top of mind that's going to lead to brand growth in this transformational omnichannel world?
Yeah, so I would say, this probably won't be revolutionary, but you need to have a laser-like focus on understanding the people who buy your brands. You need to have a laser-like focus on understanding the pain points in your category, regardless of everything, right? It can get overwhelming. You hear omni, you hear measurement, you hear data. At the end of the day, the people that are going to win are the people that understand the consumer, the people buying the products, the people that are still experiencing some type of pain point, understanding what's happening within the category. If you truly understand those issues, then you will unlock the opportunities, because then you'll go, okay, well, great. So let's see, their pain point is they're embarrassed. They don't want to buy this inside. I'll take, the ever-changing landscape of, like the menopause landscape, which has been changing, for example. So maybe people don't want to show up and buy something that has a big menopause thing on it because I don't want to show up at the counter with that. So maybe the thought is okay, how do I speak to them in a different way? How do I make it look like not something that's for some, older woman that's blah, 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 and, is not going to be feeling good about herself by buying that product? How do I make it look a little bit more health and wellness? How do I make it available in places that they can shop online for it? Those are the kind of things when people are unlocking what's holding people back from buying something that's an issue, they're going to win the game.
No debate there. They're going to win the game. And, you've used a lot of very important words today, starting all the way up top with the word omnichannel. And then you just spoke to relentlessly focusing on the consumer who, by the way, puts all of our paychecks in the mail at the end of the day. So I really appreciate, your advice to the industry. Stay close to the consumer. The rest of it is all buzzwords at the end of the day. But if you stay on that mission, life's going to be good. And sticking to that very mission, e-commerce, of course, has been the buzz since the beginning of the pandemic, right? And now 2 years have passed by. But if you look at the pure data, majority of the sales for most large brands still very much happen at the store. physically at the store. Nielsen IQ released a statistic that even in the case of BOPIS, which is buy online, pick up in-store transactions, 22% involve a visit into the physical store and an actual purchase transaction after the curbside pickup occurs. How are you preparing your brand for success in this world of blurred channels, which very much includes the in-store transaction?
Yeah, and I can't take credit for this. I'm going to have to give Diana credit for this, which was back to this idea of mindset changes. She has embedded in us all this idea of stop calling it e-commerce. So that'll be my first thing, is that we stop calling it e-commerce and we start calling it commerce. That's what she has told us. And I believe in that, because then once again, you go back to just saying, actually, where do people buy my product? And how do I need to show up there? So it becomes less about, okay, I need a strategy for e-commerce. I need a strategy for Walmart. No, it becomes a strategy for how people buy my products. And by the way, at Walmart, they may pick it up in store. They may click and collect. They may buy it online. And so how do I make sure that I understand that, once again, where they're picking up and the impact that it has on my supply chain, my logistics, how I pack and develop my bundles, because I need to be ready for a world where, okay, wait a minute, if I'm online, but the person actually wants to pick it up at the click and collect, if I'm not in the store, then I've missed the buy, because they didn't want to just buy it online. They wanted to choose it, but they want to be able to pick it up right outside the Walmart in Bentonville. So if you're not available, then you're out. So I think it's, once again, going back and understanding your world, not through these buzzwords, but through the idea of I need to find places where people buy my products. So how do I need to show up based on how they buy their products?
I want to remind our audience that if you visit cpgguys.com, you'll find all of the content we produce. And don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn, where you will always find great thought leadership and at no cost to you. Sri, okay, I've got 20 more questions now based upon everything that Dana said. We're going to have her back, because this was just a really great conversation. Dana, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciated you taking some time to speak with us and our audience.
No, thank you. Thank you both.
So, Sri, would love to hear your top takeaways of our conversation with Dana today.
First of all, Dana, thank you for appearing on the show. We thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. The big word that I want to kind of re-emphasize to everybody in this conversation is stop calling it e-commerce. I mean, the e-commerce days are so yesterday, and if you're still thinking about e-commerce, you didn't get on the bus at the right time. You didn't even get on the bus late. You just didn't get on the bus. It's omni-channel, folks. The store matters. That's another big one. And you got to show up in that 360. And Dana said something beautiful about retail media. It's not about who pays and where the budgets come from. It's follow the consumer. If the consumer is on the lower funnel, for the first time in history, you have a way to track end-to-end, right from acquisition all the way to conversion, which D2C was the only platform you could do. Enough with all the big-time attribution the industry is used to. That's where your budgets need to go, and that's where you're getting maximum value. Chase it. Again, depends on your brand's goals, but get serious, y'all, about lower funnel conversion and how a consumer is at the lower funnel at the end of the day. She talked about innovation and the role, why they even have a chief innovation strategist and how they're building things. She gave the example of menopause was a great example, right? And then you and I had a chance to see Craig live and how his world of toothpaste is so much more than just brushing teeth. And that's how a lot of us in brand land thinks about it. You got to always follow the consumer. She said that 5 times. And Craig follows the consumer. You and I were blown away when we saw that, right? And to me, 1P data was the last one she spoke about as well, right? The importance of 1P data. But 1P data is not just data that's collected in D2C. It's follow the consumer everywhere. The most important message, Peter, that she left us with, follow the consumer.
Couldn't agree more, Sri. That was great. And thank you, as always, for joining us on this journey. Love co-hosting with you. And to our audience, looking forward to speaking with you on the next episode of the CPG Guys podcast. Goodbye. The content in this podcast episode is provided for general informational purposes only. By listening to our episode, you understand that no information contained in this episode should be construed as advice from CPG Guys LLC
or the individual author, hosts, or guests, nor is it intended to be a substitute for research on any subject matter. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by CPG Guys LLC. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. The views expressed by CPG Guys LLC do not represent the views of their employers or the entity they represent. CPG Guys LLC expressly disclaims any and all liability or responsibility for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, consequential, or other damages arising out of any individual's use of, reference to, or inability to use this podcast or the information we present in this podcast.